Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming back from the lunch and beautiful outside here in Boston. I'd like to introduce you to three of your panelists today for the Meeting the Modern Donors Consumer Expectations with Classy and Salesforce. We have Tim Gumto, the lead software engineer for Salesforce here at Classy. We also have Diana Peacock, the Senior Vice President of Development and Alliances at FirstBook. And we have Renell Carter, the software consultant and solution architect at the technology partner, Coastal Cloud for FirstBook. Now, FirstBook just went live in May. They were actually scheduled live in June, so I just want to give them a shout out. They went live early with Classy. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the three panelists. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that great introduction. I'm really honored today to be joined by Renell and Diana. We're really excited to have a conversation, talk to you about technology, how it adapts to the modern nonprofit, how it can help you have a great view of your donors. And I'd just like to start off, again, thank you so much for joining us. And Diana, if you could just start and tell us a little bit about FirstBook and your mission.
Sure. Well, it's a huge honor to be here. It's my first collaborative. Very excited to be on this journey with Classy and Salesforce. FirstBook is a nonprofit social enterprise. We distribute books and educational resources to kids in need. We've got a network of more than 325,000 educators in the formal and informal space. So those are Title I school teachers and librarians and literacy specialists, as you might expect, as well as homeless shelters and healthcare clinics and nurse visitation programs. Any educator serving 70% or more kids in need has access to our online e-commerce platforms, which is how we deliver our mission. So that's we've got the FirstBook Marketplace, our primary e-commerce engine that offers discounted resources that we negotiate directly with publishers and other suppliers, deep discounts, because we are reaching this qualified network of kids who need, educators serving kids who need resources the most. And also a recently launched evergreen another e-commerce platform, the Book Bank, where we take donated product and make that available to our market. And it's been a huge ride. We are growing at a rate of about 1,000 new educator members a month, and have seen on average 30% growth of our marketplace year over year since the marketplace launched in 2008.
That's fantastic. Renell, if you could tell us a little bit about Coastal Cloud and what your focus is on there.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to come as well. We've been really thrilled to work with FirstBook on this exciting project. It brings a lot of interesting technologies together, and I think what we love the most is the fact that it really is kind of doing a little bit of everything. So Coastal Cloud is a major partner with both the Salesforce.com as well as Salesforce.org, because we work with both for-profit and nonprofit organizations based out of Florida, but with remote sites all across the country. And we have worked with tiny, small nonprofits, just bringing on their 10 free licenses with the NPSP, all the way up to enterprise-sized organizations like FirstBook, where we're really bringing together all kinds of and integrating all kinds of technologies together into an integrated solution. So that's who we are.
Thank you. Let's talk about what was the tipping point for your organization from a technology standpoint that kind of brought you to where we are today. What were you recognizing about your technology needs and where you were at, what you needed to change?
Sure, yeah. I think, like many organizations, we just came to a realization that we had outgrown our current systems. It was a mishmash of homegrown and, services that we just frankly outgrew the technology for, like Constant Contact as an example. So there was that, and then I think a recognition that this was going to be a multi-year journey. So at this moment, we have already gone through, in the past 2 years, completely re-platforming our e-commerce websites on the Magento platform, and then knew that we needed to put in a really robust constituent relationship database, and just a really robust database that could merge that e-commerce data, the constituent data, and then put the whole CRM suite and marketing automation functionality on top of that. So it's been a long journey, and we still have, we're about a third of the way through in terms of major systems overhauls.
Could you go into some of the details of your previous technology solution, and maybe some of the other vendors or other partners you were looking at initially?
Sure. I mean, I think what we realized on the constituent management side is we've got two core constituencies. One are the members that we serve, and then the other would be donors and champions and fundraisers for First Book. And as we were looking at the whole stack, we realized actually, we both need I oversee all the fundraising at First Book. I have a colleague who oversees all of the member interactions, and so. We realized that they're using Constant Contact for email communication, direct marketing. We're using Luminate for our online fundraising. It's the same activity of campaign management, marketing automation, and we're paying for it in two different technologies, both of which we've kind of outgrown. And so the whole process was kind of this. Let's look at the needs separately, and then we bring it together, and then we'd say, we're trying to bite off too much, and let's look at it separately again, which then led us back to looking at the stack together. And that's how we landed here with the Salesforce core nonprofit success pack for my team's needs, Pardot for both the engagement and the donor email marketing automation, and and Renelle can speak to this better than I can, and then a connection between the Magento, e-commerce, and Salesforce, so that we have that transaction. And transaction is the wrong word. I use a lot of commercial terms because the way that we accomplish our mission is through this e-commerce platform. It's by getting books and resources out through that manner. So that's why it equals mission for us.
So, Renelle, as a follow-up, can you talk about how it was, from your perspective, piecing those disparate elements together?
Yeah, so I can. It was, I've worked in both realms a fair amount with both, like I said, nonprofits who have used the Nonprofit Success Pack, and for-profit organizations that have used the Salesforce, just mostly Sales Cloud. And this is the first time where we've brought them both together and under one house. And it's exciting because it really isn't done every day, and it's a neat way to see the way First Book is going to be able to eventually take a look at not only what we often talk about, a 360-degree view of your donor. They also want to have this 360-degree view of their member and what books they're buying, and what needs they have to serve the children in their particular area. But more importantly, I think most excitingly, is for the first time, First Book's going to be able to see how many people and what types of people are both members and donors, and bringing that all into one picture and one place where we can see the full view of these people is really exciting.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about getting this full picture view of the donors, and we kind of talked about like maybe the two sides of the house, the marketing piece and the donor piece, were there any challenges that came about organizationally in trying to get champions to on either side to actually pull everything under one roof, or was that difficult? Was it easier than expected?
Well, I think there's always a change management aspect to any implementation, and I think, the concerns raised by staff level are different than the concerns raised perhaps by leadership, and so as the business champion, I'm kind of trying to alleviate both. But generally, like I said, we knew that one of the core principles of First Book and how we accomplish our mission and just how we go about our work is scale. So we knew that we needed these robust technologies to scale. We knew that we needed a tool like Classy to scale our online fundraising and take, our offline community-based fundraising program into this current century in an online peer-to-peer. So, I think that the biggest challenge perhaps was less on the day-to-day team side who were just clamoring for new technologies. I think everyone underestimates the time that it takes to do it well. And all of the thinking that needs to go in up front before you get actually into the system itself. But the biggest piece was really conveying the ROI to leadership and showing how these new tools would help take our program to the next level, and that we're ready for these kinds of really robust tool sets.
Can I add something to that too? I think another unique situation with First Book is because you partner so nicely with organizations that help you in your fundraising in their local areas, you also have to manage the change for them as well. So it's not just internal and potentially your constituents, but also the organizations that you partner with. It's like a whole nother level of change management that you are also managing.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. One of the things that we've done that I think that it will continue to do as we grow was to engage some of our core constituents that we're going to be using the platform in the design of the platform. So for example, with the Classy peer-to-peer software, it's bringing this offline community-based program, online and offline, I should say, it's a mix, but really taking advantage of the great UI and the social integration. And so we're implementing that with several large corporate partners, as well as these local groups of volunteers. And so we knew that it was really important to have those champions involved in going through a demo. Like, we built it out and then we did a demo, and they said, well, what about this and what about this? And and so then it was an iterative process. And as they get into it, we'll continue to adapt, partnering with them.
Yeah, and have them grow with it all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were some of the compelling pieces of this Classy and Salesforce solution together that made it stand out against other potential solutions?
Well, I think, as we were looking at our stack needs of all our current systems and then what could be future systems, it really started with Salesforce database as the core for the reasons I stated of the ability to integrate large volumes of disparate kinds of data. And then it wasn't a one-for-one, well, we're going to take this and replace it with that, but we had to kind of look at the whole suite together. So the integration of those three core technologies on my side of the house, Pardot, Classy, and Salesforce, were really important to us. And then ultimately, it's the reporting that we're going to be getting out of Salesforce. We have some pretty complex. If the theory is, in order to scale, we need to deliver a personalized donor experience, but do that at scale, then, and for us with our corporate partners, we of course have to report back out how much money they've raised on our behalf and where those resources are going in the community. And so Salesforce will, and the campaign architecture integration between Classy and Salesforce was a really important part of the selection process for us. Great. That answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yep. How about, Renelle, from your perspective, how was it working with Classy and as a solution architect putting these pieces together?
It's just been a great tool to work with, where it is really designed to work directly with Salesforce and take advantage of things like this campaign structure in Salesforce that allows us to take the information that would get part of the picture. So I believe there are many organizations who can get all of the information that they need from a reporting perspective out of a tool like Classy, because there's already a lot there available. But the fact that like Diana mentioned, that information integrates directly into Salesforce, into a full-scale database that can house all of the rest of the disparate data that's coming in from all these other sources, has made all the difference, right? So that we can build this data model that will bring everything together, and Classy's ability to bring all of that information in, so that then we can report back out in a full picture, as opposed to having to look at just what has happened in Classy and the donations, would be a totally separate exercise from looking at what has happened for sales in the Magento e-commerce site. But now we can actually bring it all into one place. So the integration, I think, has been key from my very limited perspective of a solution architect. The interface, the UI, I think has been wonderful too. It's not my area of expertise, but I know that my colleague who was very involved in helping Diana's team redesign and build their campaigns, which had started as very simple, single page, somewhat old-fashioned donation pages on the website. I think, frankly, sort of underestimated what it would take to turn those into even just a basic donation page in the Classy interface, because there's just so much more available. I remember being like, oh, we just need some images. Well, just going back and finding all of the images that would help First Book much more effectively tell the story, which is the strength of the Classy.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Classy is allowing us to do is harness the fact that First Book's a national organization, national reach, and Canadian, I should say. So we've got a separate Classy instance for First Book Canada. But giving is local in many cases, and some of these programs, these community-based fundraising programs, the Classy interface allows them to kind of have so for this corporate partner I mentioned, each office does fundraisers around the country. They have this interface that is branded their program. The office can customize it based on the specific community-based organizations they're supporting. Do the fundraising in Classy. That goes into Salesforce. For my needs, I'm going to have to report out across all 80 offices and roll that up eventually. But so the dollars come in to via Classy, then and that has to round trip for us. So then they go back out in terms of micro grants or virtual gift cards or credits out to organizations that the corporate partner is supporting locally. That happens on the marketplace, where then educators go in and they place their orders, and then that gets fulfilled. And so then that transaction data comes back into Salesforce, which shows the impact of that fundraiser and the gift. And it's a many-to-many operation. So they're raising money for maybe 10 different organizations locally, and that's going to look different here in Boston than and it might be that they're raising money for one organization in St. Louis or whatever the example may be. So we needed that kind of flexibility, and we needed that ability to round trip the funding to take it in, convert it to impact, and then report back out on that impact to the donor. Yeah. And that's what we'll eventually be able to do with, once everything is all fully configured.
That's a great intro to my next question, which would be around, we've been talking about this 360 view of the donor. That was kind of what led you to this point where you needed to have a better understanding of that donor through combining your databases. Now we've kind of, started rolling that out. But what's next? Like, as a strategic initiative for you, how do you see, and you've kind of been talking about it, but what's like the next stage in fully understanding your donor, or as well the title of the panel, the modern donor? How does that help?
Sure. Yeah, I think we talked about all the back-end side of the integration that gives that 360 view. So when I look up Diana Peacock, I'll see all the different ways in which I've interacted with the organization. From the donor-centric side, I think one of the things we're so excited about Classy and its UI for is just that we increasingly realize that we need to meet donors where they are in the manner that they want to be interacted with. And there's this bar set for us as nonprofits by every other brand and online experience that we have as consumers. So you expect a First Book to have the same kind of one-click, frictionless experience as an Uber or as a Amazon one-click to just make, I'm inspired, I want to act, and let's do it. And that as the nonprofit sector, we have to kind of like catch up to that, and Classy enables us to do that. Excited about the future enhancements coming from Classy in that way. So I think that's where I see the program going, and being able to do this have a much more customized feel for those champions or donors. Excited to do a lot more testing. We do a lot more A/B testing, or testing this form versus this form, or this way of doing peer-to-peer and this way of doing peer-to-peer. It's just part of our DNA and how we approach these things, and excited to now have it all in one place that I can see, oh, this works better than this.
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
Well,
You're on it.
I mean, just add to that too, and then make changes quite easily, right? You don't have to go back to a developer and say, redesign my web page now because
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think that was another one of those tipping points where, as a nonprofit, e-commerce delivery system, our IT team always has, I'm sure everybody's IT team has way more than on their plates than is humanly possible to do. And there's a limitation as a nonprofit to how much you can engage consultants and others. So part of the integration design in terms of even how my team is partnering with Renell's team and putting the technology in place is with this eye towards teaching us to fish, and so that we can begin to make those changes, and we're not beholden as we had been forever to make go through IT for requests, or go through consultants for requests. So we'll be able to do a lot more on our own.
Great. Kind of wanted to switch gears. We've been heavily technology focused, but wanted to talk about something that's important to all three of us on the stage, is the partnerships. Classy's partnership with FirstBook, your partnership with Coastal Cloud, all of our partnerships with Salesforce. Can you just talk about, I'll have you start, Diana, just the importance of the partnership and what that means?
Yeah, it has been an extraordinary partnership with all parties involved, from the Salesforce team that hung with us through a 2-year process of getting to the technology stack that we eventually signed off on, and helping, and during that time, the technology adapted, and so we're actually in different tools than we were in that initial place, and it's all for the best and fits us really well. So I think there was a great partnership there, and the partnership with Classy, day one, it's just been a completely different experience than we've had with other technology providers, where they're alongside us and they're helping, and they're on the phone call with my partner doing the focus group, and helping, be there for support and moral, technical, and otherwise. and then, of course, with Coastal Cloud, just a great working relationship. I don't know. I think it's a good working relationship. that there's just a high degree of trust, I think, and it's not to say that we don't all push back on each other, because it happens. but because of that foundation and partnership approach versus vendor and or consultee relationship, I think that's what has made this work.
And Renell, what your perspective?
Yeah, and I totally agree with everything Diana said. I think that the key is that it is a partnership, and anyone who has ever been in a personal partnership understands that it involves trust, like you said, commitment, right? So it's not a fly-by-night type situation where we're going to drop it in and leave, but we're trying to make sure that that FirstBook learns how to use the tool and teach them to fish. So I think that having that long-term commitment that we're seeing, with Classy as well. Whenever there's an issue, immediately get on the phone and there's someone to talk to help work things through. So that long-term commitment. And I think what really helps there is the communication, right? So I think that where I think our project has succeeded fairly well, at least until now, has been, and continues to, being focused on that communication. So, having regularly scheduled stakeholder meetings. We had weekly meetings for quite a while with the Classy folks when we were getting ready to go live on Classy on May 1st. We were, meeting constantly, and just having that line of communication open and built into the infrastructure of the project, I think, has really allowed the partnership to work as well as it has, I think. And should continue to.
Plus, I've found the partners to be very adaptive, whether it's being on a call and kind of, you've all been in that moment of a technology integration where you're like beating your head against the desk, like, why is this so hard? And just pulling back and saying, are we approaching this the right way? Maybe we'll continue down this path of how we're trying to get to the answer, or let's just stop for a minute and say, should we be thinking about this and do it differently? And I appreciate that across all of these teams, we have the space to do that, and sometimes we end up just, no, actually just got to slog through and get it done, or other times we'll say, no, actually, okay, let's take this different approach. And I've really appreciated the flexibility, or as things get, every time you get into this, it uncovers all these other things that you didn't expect, and the flexibility to reprioritize and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's been helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I've been working on our Salesforce integration for about 5 years, and I mean, it would not be anywhere if it wasn't for all of our partners at Classy that help us learn and teach us like the different models that they're using, the different ways they need to use software, everything they need out of these tools. So it's a constant, I feel, back and forth that we can help each other learn, and to me, it's just it's an invaluable approach. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Kind of one of the last things I wanted to ask was if you had to give some advice to an organization going through a similar project, what would it be?
Start? Sure. Yeah, I guess especially with a project of this scale, and one of the things I was actually wishing I had mentioned when we were having our topic of the partnership, is that I am very grateful that we have designed this project to be one that will be phased in and developed through iterations over a period of time. And I'm thankful just that the client relationship is such that everyone understands the value in that, and the fact that it takes restraint sometimes not to try and do it all at once, and recognizing that things will get a little harder at first before things will be eventually easier. So I'm very grateful for just that understanding and willingness to go through this process in stages and spread it over time. And so that, I think, is my biggest piece of advice is, if you are looking to take on really almost any size project, but especially the larger projects, spending the time up front to recognize what are the true priorities and how can you divide those priorities up over time to allow small deliveries or small implementations that can be put into place, ideally out of the box as much as possible, so to speak, get things in place, use them, and then start to understand how you might want to tweak or customize further, but get something in place and get using it before you try and boil the ocean and either never finish or end up with something that maybe doesn't meet your needs that you thought you would have when you started.
Diana?
Yeah, I guess the same thing. In addition to the crawl, walk, run approach that you just mentioned, I think the core principle for this whole integration has been out of the box. Configuration, not customization. And that's because we had some, frankly, bad experiences in the past doing highly customized, whether that was customized features of the Magento e-commerce platform or customized Salesforce implementation to a place. It's just such a dynamic environment in the nonprofit sector overall that you need to be able to adapt with. In order to harness what the technology is giving you, you need to be able to adapt to that. So when you customize heavily, then suddenly when your technology partner upgrades, then it all breaks. And that's what happened to us. So we are really good at building Fabergé eggs at First Book, and so we wanted to learn from that, and they're stunning, but wanted to learn from that and really take advantage of out of the box and go with the trajectory of these great technology partners, and trust that you guys have a lot more clients, and we need to somehow meet in the middle and adapt our business process.
Yeah, and I mean, that does follow our approach. We do try not to build one-off solutions, but a solution that can work with everyone, and the configuration is a great example. Everyone wants to operate differently, so we want to give people the options to adapt it to their needs, but have it be flexible also, so it can work with a variety of organizations.
That said, we'll still put our hat in the ring for enhancement requests on a regular basis. We can't help ourselves.
All right, well, I wanted to make sure we left some time for some questions. Again, I'd like to thank you both for joining me up here. It's been a great talk, and if there's any questions from the audience, I'd be happy to answer them.
Not yet.
Is that working?
There it is.
Yep.
Can you? Oh, okay. Hi. First, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So my organization is in the middle of making the switch to Salesforce, and we've been on Classy now for about a year and a half. So kind of a two-part thing is, do you have any advice about what we should be doing right out of the gate as we're building that Salesforce integration, which we're working with Idealist Consulting. They're doing great. And the other part is that, can you talk a little more about how you met those donor consumer expectations using that integration? How did that better enable you to acquire and retain your donors?
I'll take the first part of that maybe, and then I'll let you take the second. I guess I would say overall, and Renelle, feel free to step in too if you have any comments. I mean, to me, one of the most important things is, I would say, familiarizing yourself with Classy's integration documentation, just to get a sense of how it might function. I think knowing your own data and having an understanding of the type of data you're going to be capturing in Classy is also very important. Are you doing peer-to-peer fundraising? Are you doing tickets and event type fundraising? And how do you want that to look in Salesforce? What are you expecting, given your existing data and what the data coming through in Classy is? And then I'd certainly, with everyone, recommend testing in a sandbox, just seeing what different types of donations, what different types of events look like, and how that's fitting in with your expectations and your organization's needs. I don't know if, Renelle, if you'd have any other...
I guess the only thing I would add is, just going back to the suggestion that you try and start small and then grow, would be to really focus on the data first. Make sure that you understand how the Classy data will merge with the other data that you may already have in Salesforce or plan to add. So really making sure that you get that right. I'm a firm believer that if you get that right and you have your data there, you can do all kinds of things with it eventually. But first get it in there and get it right, and then that will allow you to add automation or integrate with other tools in the future. So I would add that.
The only other thing, I'll speak to the retention side in a second, but the other thing I would add from a more technical business analyst perspective is, as Renelle knows, I'm always harping on, we need to understand the business definition of the data first, and that structure and integration, so that you're making the rules outside of the system, understanding how the system's going to work, and then you go ahead and you do the migration and whatnot. But things as simple in Salesforce as, because we do individual donations and corporate donations, and we need to be able to report back on both. So defining, when it's a household and when it's tied to a corporate account and other things like that. There's just a lot of minutia work that needs to be decided upon by the business, and that should happen first before with an understanding of what that integration looks like. So that's on the technical side. On the donor retention side, how is Classy and Salesforce, how are they helping us retain donors? I'd say, it's just a much better UI, and because of the integration and the Pardot customization that will be enabled, the campaign email management, we'll be able to do a lot better segmentation and then tracking how those donors are doing, tracking how donors are responding to various online and offline messages. Yeah, I think that would be.
And even managing how many times you're touching these same people, right?
Yes.
Having them all in one place with product.
Yeah. So something else that might be another thing that nonprofits experience, we have some local groups, whether that's a company that's raising money or whether that's a community-based organization. And so we have to know who the constituent is and whether we as a national organization are allowed to message to them or not. We still need to treat them as a donor and thank them and show them lots of love, but in terms of solicitations for that second gift, there are certain donors that are off limits because they're getting asked by our constituents. So this 360-degree view of the donor is critical for that as well. Yeah.
Other questions? I actually have one, and this is more for Diana. You mentioned the Uber one-click feature itself. How do you prioritize and even decide on the functions you want to deliver for your consumers from a feature perspective?
That's a great question. I think it's, as we've heard a lot of different speakers talk about over the past day, it's really involving the donor in that experience and the decision to show them the range of possibility. I think sometimes the tricky part about having robust tools is that there are so many different options. And like I was saying before, running different tests and really trying to understand it from their perspective. I mean, I got a call from one of our local community-based fundraisers. To this very point, we don't do things perfectly, but we learn from them, and then we get better the next time. And and just through that conversation, it helped me understand. Wow, there's this blind spot that we had in the whole user experience, and as simple as, well, I'm telling my donor in the community to support First Book, and they come to First Book National, and then they can't find me, and we had already architected, well, you've got this customized experience and a unique Classy campaign for your community, and we thought we had it all figured out, and really it's engaging your donors in that experience to help you see your own blind spots, I think, and make those feature decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the audience for our panel? Here we go.
Hi. So my organization is sort of in a similar moment of trying to build new systems that, because we've outgrown the old ones. And I was wondering, particularly, Diana, if you could dig a little deeper or describe a little more some of the ways that you approached drawing out from the different sections of the organization what sort of their business understanding of their data was. Because one of the challenges that we're running into is there are a lot of different departments where really it seems like the use case is very similar, but they can't really articulate sort of where it might be different or what, really figuring out how to find that common vocabulary. So were there any approaches, techniques, strategies that you found helpful in sort of that very first part of the process where you get really square on what your definitions are and what your processes are before you then migrate them into a new system?
Sure. I'll speak a little bit about the relationship that we have with, as a leadership team at First Book. So I think it starts there, with my colleague Becky, with our SVP of National Engagement, with our SVP of IT, with our SVP of Finance. There's this sort of common understanding that the goal of this entire, we have a technology governance committee at First Book. It's called the TAG, where any investment above $5,000 has to go through this cross-functional leadership review, go through a business case. And so at that level of the organization, we had a common understanding of we're not all going to come at this from our own pet projects and pet data, pet functionality. It needs to be, we need to derive the efficiency of the commonalities across organizations. So it starts there, and then I think I think having a great integrator that can, or a business analyst department in the nonprofit that can help draw that out, and it's kind of, I think people will get it if you help explain to them, if they know a little bit more about the underlying, here's how information is organized, and here's how it actually is very similar, and it's just the time-consuming change management process, I think, of stakeholder building. That's not an easy, that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that's how we did it at First Book. And we do a lot of things cross-functionally where we've got, I'll use the Pardot implementation right now as an example, where we've got groups from my business owners and my side of the shop, as well as the engagement side of the shop, so that we're not making decisions on one side that adversely affect the other and vice versa, or that we're finding that commonality. So, I don't know. Probably not.
And for one more question, if anyone has a question for the panel.
Okay.
Going twice, gone. Oh, wait.
Oh, there's one.
Hi there, I'm Michael. This is a question for Diana and Ronelle. What do you see coming up with Classy? That you're talking in terms of what's coming in the future that really gets you excited, that you see creates a new opportunity for you?
I think we'll probably say the same thing. Really excited about Classy Pay. We, as most nonprofits, to the point of meeting donors where they are, we've got small revenue streams coming from a lot of different payment processors, whether that's PayPal or Authorize.net is our merchant and payment processor for the e-commerce side, so that's what we picked for Classy. Very excited to be able to support multiple platforms, and also very excited about Classy Passport. Our work is growing globally, and we already have these 2 instances of Classy and Salesforce to support the Canadian team and my team and the US-based team, but we get requests frequently from our global NGO or global multinational corporate partners that want to run a fundraiser at back to school with the call centers that are all across the country and in the Philippines, or wherever. So excited for Classy Passport.
Yeah. I think you took my point. Yeah.
But I'd like to thank everyone for coming today and participating in the panel, both listening and asking the questions. If I could ask you to give it a hand for our panel group before we leave.